This episode may not be suitable for all listeners. Therefore, listener discretion is advised.
That's the funny thing.
Hello, strange ones.
I'm Lisa.
I'm Faith.
And I'm Sharon.
And this is She Sees Weird People.
That's the funny thing.
All right. How's it going, ladies?
Oh, just frying over here.
Living the dream.
It's pouring down rain here. I mean, pouring.
I'm hoping that'll happen here because we're only like an hour and a half away. But yeah, it's very hot. It's like 105 degrees.
Ooh. It's cloudy here, but we haven't got the rain yet.
It's crap.
So what's been going on with you, Faith?
I'm just working and softball. That's been fun.
Who did you win your first game?
We didn't, but we did win by forfeit on one game. And then on Thursday, we did win one, and then we lost the other.
We didn't.
But we had fun.
That's what matters. That's what matters. What about you, Lisa?
Just been working and unpacking my house, which is a total shit show.
I hope I don't have to move for a long time, okay? 'Cause it's gonna be hell.
really. I'm staying here
If I
forever.
have moved down, y'all better come get what you want because I'm burning this thing to the ground.
I know. That's
In a way.
that way. When I move, I usually get rid of most of what I own, except for like the little sentimental things. I like starting over.
Not me, I hold on to everything.
But yeah, what have you been up to, Mom?
Oh, well, this weekend, Jack the Snack and I went to the Naked Acre. Okay, the Naked Acre is a piece of land that we bought pre-COVID. It's an acre up in the mountains, and we decided that we wanted a place that when we got older that we could just run through the forest naked and nobody could say anything to us. Well, now that we are older, nobody wants to run through the forest naked because there's lots of foliage and bugs, and we don't want to scare little childrens. But we do like to go up. We do like to go up and just hang out and be quiet and ride the four-wheeler and barbecue and do all those things. But this time I let your dad pack the food, and he didn't pack any for me, and he's on this diet, all right, where all he eats is he's on a carb-free diet because he's trying to lose weight. I cannot live that way. I cannot.
You're all starving to damn
I
death.
was so hungry. I was hungry. I can't eat red meat and stuff all the time. I can't. I was starving to death. And he says, I finally just asked him, I says, is this some kind of chubby girl intervention? Because I'm starving and I'm fixing to go to the nearest, I don't care, store, whatever it is, and start gobbling down some carbs.
Didn't you leave and get a salad from town?
I did. I made him go get me a salad. I did. I
Worst
cannot.
campers ever.
I just told him, I was like, what are you doing? You know, where's the chips? Where's the peach gummies?
And the s'mores.
And the s'mores and the potatoes. Where are these things?
Yeah.
You know what he brought? He brought meat and squash.
Probably peanuts.
No sandwich stuff, no chips, nothing.
He brought a bag of beef jerky.
Well, and so that's what I did this weekend.
Starved.
In the mountains.
Sounds like the beginning of one of our stories.
It really does.
I promise you the story that I have for you this week absolutely did not start like that.
Yeah, I'm nervous about this story a little bit because it's so like,
I I read a little bit about it because I didn't know anything about Albert Fish.
Yeah, he's despicable.
The thing about this story is that I've crunched it down into a shorter time slot. But once you start getting into this could be something you did for hours. It is something. There's so much detail.
Yeah, you could, and you'd have so many questions from. I haven't heard the story in the way that you're going to do it, but I know about him, and you could focus on so many different areas of it, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, he's a little bit crazy. That's not even a good word for him. He's despicable. He's sick. It's bad.
Yeah. Get excited, Faith.
Excited over here.
And break.
Okay, here we go. The first thing we're going to do is talk about his early life up to, let's say, 19.
Okay.
Now, Albert Fish was born Hamilton Howard Fish. That was his original name.
Oh, Hammy.
To Randall Fish and Ellen Fish on May 19th, 1870 in Washington, D.C. Randall was 43 years older than Ellen, and he died in 1875 when Albert was just 5 years old.
Oh, no.
And he had three siblings, Walter, Annie, and Edwin, and one deceased brother named Albert. Now, due to the hardships of raising children as a single mother in the 1890s, Ellen put her children in orphanages until she could care for them.
Which wasn't uncommon at the time, right?
No, it really wasn't. That happened very, very often, and that happened all the way up through the end of the Depression.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on there. They were all put in separate orphanages they were all there for 4 or 5 years.
I wonder if that explains like the serial killer boom in the 70s.
It could, because what I'm about to tell you is pretty horrific. Albert was in St. John's in Washington, D.C., and this particular orphanage had begun as a Civil War orphanage for orphans whose parents had died due to the war.
Oh, dang. So it's old.
It's old. It's right across the street from the White House, I believe. It's right there. It's it's a historical monument kind of thing.
That's
Yeah, you definitely want to remember that.
He was often teased and called Ham and Eggs due to his first name being Hamilton. So he later changed his name to Albert in honor of his deceased brother. So, he has some feelings. Never.
Never.
Now, he was often whipped and beaten in the orphanage, where he discovered that he actually enjoyed physical pain. It was reported that the beatings would often give him erections, which the other kids teased him about. Now, there's a book written by this guy named, his name is Harold Schechter. And this guy was a professor of American literature at Queens College City University of New York, and he was the author of a book called Deranged: The Shocking True Story of America's Most Fiendish Killer. This was about Albert Fish. And what he said was this about the orphanage. While there, he was subjected to all manner of physical and sexual abuse and humiliation and torture, which completely warped his personality out of shape. It turned him into the kind of monstrous being that he was. Now, if you want to read more about the details from this, because like I said, rabbit hole number 1 is right there at that orphanage and what happened there. But you can read that book and find out more information about that.
Yeah, and I mean, just like kind of like a cap there is that what he experienced was childhood sexual, emotional, and verbal abuse and physical abuse, and that teaches a kid that violence is okay.
There was a couple of reports here and there about things that happened before his father died, but for the most part, I really couldn't find any abusive situations there that were any that were different than the time. You know what I mean? That the type of discipline that all the children, that most children got anyway. A swat on the behind or whatever. But can you imagine being 5 years old and going from two parents and a home to this horrific place where these things were happening?
The other thing that went through my mind is the attachments. You know, what happens to people when they're young, and the attachments that they have are insecure.
I
Yeah.
lost his whole family.
Yeah, can bring out a lot of negative coping mechanisms and behaviors.
Well, I checked into some of the family history though, and there was many members of his family had mental illnesses, including religious mania. One brother was confined to a state mental hospital. They said that one aunt was just plain crazy. There's a history of schizophrenia in the family. His sister was said to have mental afflictions, and his mother suffered from visual hallucinations. So there was a lot of that going on in this family.
Yeah, that's a lot of genetic predisposition. And so
There's your nature versus nurture connection. It was both. It was a perfect storm.
Okay, I have questions, but I will wait to see if you already have an answer planned.
In 1879, his mom got a government job and was able to retrieve her children from the orphanage and look after them. But much of the damage had already been done, and his early childhood experiences were already in play to create the Albert Fish we now know. By 12, in 1882, he was in a homosexual relationship with a boy who introduced him to bathhouses where he spent most weekends watching boys undress.
And the thing that's wrong there is not a homosexual
No,
relationship.
it's that he's 12.
Yeah, that's like, developmentally not ready for that.
No 12-year-old, male, female, whatever the relationship is ready for a sexual relationship. Their bodies are not ready. Their brains are not ready. They're just not ready.
Yeah.
But if this kid has been having sexual relationships of some sort since he was 5, it probably doesn't seem a bit weird to him at all.
No, it's what he learned is normal at some point.
Well, this was not just a 12-year-old boy that he picked up. This child also taught him, he was into the whole feces and urine thing, and he taught him about this. Okay?
That's disgusting, but there's DSM diagnoses for that.
Yeah, they were into that, and so that's how he spent his puberty years doing those things. And he got his first arrest was at 19 for forgery. Okay, so he was busy out there.
What did he forge?
I do not know. I just know that he was arrested for forgery. But he was a petty criminal. I mean, he would steal things. He'd con people. He just
He's going wild.
So by 1890, all right, Fish arrives in New York, and he works as a male sex worker, and he also worked as a painter, like painting houses and things. And he began raping and molesting boys at this time, and most of them were under 6 years old.
Yeah, and so you feel bad for him up until you hear that.
Right. And then he's working. Some of the stories that they told were that he would be working in a building as a painter or a maintenance guy, and he would have his uniform or his painter clothes on with nothing underneath so that he could easily access his own body to do whatever he needed to do. And he would do this in the basements of these maintenance buildings. He popped around between jobs a lot. If he molested kids at one end of the city, he would pick up and move to the other end of the city and never go back. He visited a museum at one point when he was about that time, at about the same time, where he was able to view a bisected penis. And he became morbidly fascinated by castration and sexual mutilation. you know how you will go, I don't know if you've ever been to, if you've ever seen,
A bisected penis? I have
no,
not.
no.
Can't say I have.
I cannot say that I have either, but do you remember those? They would travel around, and it was all of these bodies that had been donated, and it would be their just their muscles or their bones or whatever. What is it called? And this just happened like in the early 2000s. This wasn't that long ago, but they would take all these people would donate their bodies, and they would skin them, and then pose them so that you could get a really good look at the inside of the bodies. And
Is this educational?
you would think so, but it just reminded me of something like that. I mean, I can't imagine having that in a museum, but anyway,
I mean, was it a science museum?
it had to be. I mean, it had to be something like that. I mean, I can't imagine, like, come back in the alley and see my museum. I don't think they did,
Yeah, no. And there are, museums that about everything, like even, letting you know about, say, sexuality or like the physical body. Some people want to know.
So now that he's gotten this in his system, Albert Fish decides that he's going to go and try it out. And he was such a dog. He either attacked little children, or he sometimes had relationships with mentally impaired men and people that he could have a lot of power over. And at one point, he attempted to castrate a man who had a learning impairment. And when the man became, he cut off half his penis. He tied this guy up, he cut off half his penis. The guy looks at him in his face. He's terrified, he's screaming, he's upset, and Fish panics, and he pours hydrogen peroxide over the wound, slathers it in Vaseline, wraps it up, gives the guy a $10 bill, kisses him on the cheek, and leaves.
What the hell?
Yeah.
And so what happens next to this poor kid? Like, that's...
He doesn't know for some time what happens to this kid. He never asked. He didn't care.
Like one of the most vulnerable populations. That's screwed up.
So after this, he was chill for a little bit, but instead of going to attack other people, he started visiting brothels where he was regularly whipped and beaten. That was where that went.
That's the funny sound.
Now in 1989, his mama set him up with Anna Mary Hoffman, and they were married.
Poor Anna.
And they had 6 children.
God.
Poor children.
Albert, Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry Fish. Now, the children reported that he was a very good father and a mother to them because their mom left. That's a shocker.
Yeah.
And she ran away with the handyman, but he worked all the time. He provided well for them, and he treated them kindly, although they said he was weird AF. But he never abused them or anything like that.
I wonder if she ran off for a good reason. Like, not that there's great reasons to leave your children, but there are sometimes reasons, especially at that time. Like, if you leave, you can't take your kids.
Well, I'm going to tell you, that's weird. That is all so weird. I mean, you have to know this guy is weird.
Yeah, and so, like, I can't speak to why, but it would make sense if part of the reason she left was because of him. Maybe not just being of the time trope.
No,
I want you to whip me.
I think this was a lot more complicated than we could possibly imagine. Rabbit hole number 2.
Yeah.
One I did not go down because I would have not come out. In 1903, he was arrested for grand larceny, and he was incarcerated at Sing Sing for a bit.
He needs a little Sing Sing time, sounds like.
Okay, we're going to take a little break while he's in Sing Sing, and I'm going to tell you about some of the psychopathy and behavior of Albert Fish, because there is some gnarly stuff, and I'm going to tell you the things he was into once, and I am not going to get into great detail with each victim because they were children, and I didn't realize that when I started researching this, that all of his victims were children, but they were. So here is a trigger warning for you. And this is not for little children's ears. This is terrifying, and I really I don't want anybody's kids listening to this unless you have got like massively tough children, because this is terrifying. Okay.
Grown man children.
Yes.
That's the Helly Handy.
Now, I'm going to do my best to pronounce this. Lisa, you might have to help me a little bit because it's not in English. And, Faith will let me know if I don't pronounce it right. So I'm counting on you too.
Okay.
All right. This guy, his name is Frederick Wortham, and he was the guy who took a good old look at Albert Fish when he was caught, finally caught. This guy was a psychiatrist and an author. He had a reputation as very progressive. He treated poor black patients who couldn't get health care because of their color of their skin. He did it anyway. So this guy was pretty stable. And he evaluated Albert Fish in 1934-35. He wrote the book Show of Violence about his encounter with Fish.
Okay.
Now, in keeping with the views of the given era, and we're talking the 1930s. So some of these things you're going to be like, what's wrong with that? But some of it is, this is the way they looked at things back then. His assessment of Fish asserted that Fish exhibited 18 different paraphilia behaviors, and another doctor even added on another one at the end. So like the first one is anilingus. This sexual activity that involves
ass.
Thank you. Your rear end. Cannibalism, the eating of human flesh, castration and self-castration, coprophagia, the compulsive consumption of feces.
Yeah, it's gross. She's having a hard time getting it out.
Cunnilingus. Say it, Lisa.
You're a grown-ass woman. It is cunnilingus, and there you go. Sexy.
Cunnilingus, oral sex with a woman. Exhibitionism, having others watch. Fellatio is oral sex with a man. Fetishism is sexual. It's like people being obsessed with objects or feet or whatever during sex. Body parts.
Yeah, and just to put it out there, like a lot of these behaviors are very normal, that people have fetishes and kinks, and that's not the weird thing. It's
the combination
and the motive.
And it was the 30s too. Remember that. This was the in the 30s. If you were doing these things, you were woo.
Yeah, it wasn't smiled upon. You're supposed to be a family man.
Mm-hmm. Flagellation or flagellation. See, if I say flagellation, I think about something else. But flagellation, flogging or beating, either as a religious discipline or for sexual gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And he would do that to himself. He did it with a big paddle with nails sticking out the end of it. I don't mean one nail. I mean 30 nails coming out of this paddle.
Yeah, and that's the wild part too, is people do have, that as a practice in sexuality, but the fact that there were nails on it and he was doing it to himself and he's dealing with all this other stuff, it's like, okay, not okay.
Homosexuality. Dun dun dun.
Anything but that. No family is safe. God.
Well, this, like I said, this was from the 30s. This isn't now.
It's Pride Month, so I gotta
Well, you're a sex therapist, so I fully expect you to say all the things.
Flogging is not abnormal.
Okay. Hypereroticism, that's hypersexuality.
Which is also not super weird. It's just, it's, do you use these things for good or for evil?
Okay, how about this for weird? Infibulation.
Okay.
That is a severe form of female genital mutilation that involves cutting and stitching and all kinds of things.
Yeah, no, see, we don't hurt each other.
Masochism.
That.
Masochism.
Common, but yeah, severity matters.
Pedophilia.
Not ideal.
Piquerism.
I think some people experiment with piquerism without knowing, but the way that he did it and the extent and all of it, it's more paraphilic than kink related. And so I'll let you tell what that is.
It refers to sexual interest in penetrating the skin of another person with sharp objects, such as pins, razors, knives, etc. It is rarely done on one's own self, although that is what he did. He would do it to himself. Sometimes this is serious enough to cause extreme injury or even death.
Yeah, so if you think about it, you know, people wear like the collars with the spikes. You know, you see when someone's dressed up for like BDSM or something. And like, it's just about small sensations, but what he's doing is frightening.
Sadism.
Yeah.
That is the tendency to derive pleasure from inflicting pain, and masochism is the tendency to derive pleasure from one's own pain or humiliation. So those are the difference in those two things.
He just got it all, man.
He really does cover a lot.
Unionism, or undonism, whichever it is sexual pleasure derived from an obsession with urine. Voyeurism, it's the sexual interest in or practice of spying on other people engaged in intimate behavior.
Yes. But then also, okay, so voyeurism, you know, if there's consent, it's not so strange. But when there's not consent, that's when it's an issue. But some people have ways of participating in that. Like you can, like people post videos on the internet of themselves doing things on sites specifically where other people can watch. And so that's where like voyeurism and exhibitionism meet. But it's all about consent on whether or not that's, you know.
Well, what about necrophilia?
It's all about consent. No, I'm just yeah, no comment.
That necrophilia, in case you don't know, is sex with the unalive.
Yeah, it's hard to get consent from an unalived person.
That's the funny thing.
In 1917, after his wife left him and his children, he began to have like auditory hallucinations. He did things like he would wrap himself up in a carpet, and he told, when his son found him and he's like, "Dad, what in the hell are you doing?" He was like, "The Apostle John told me to do this, so I'm doing it."
Okay, yeah, hearing some symptomology up in there.
This was about the time that he also started indulging in self-harming behaviors. He would insert needles into his groin and pelvis.
He went hard with the piquerism. No pun intended.
A later x-ray showed that he had 29 needles lodged in his pelvic region that he couldn't get out.
Oh my God.
I know, I'm thinking about walking like that. I'd be like, ooh, ah.
That was the thing. Is you know what? That is one of the things that they talked about in one of the documentaries I talked about, was how he walked and how gingerly he sat down and how he had this strange gait about the way he walked, and that's why.
He's like, whoop, got a needle in my bum.
Gotta rearrange.
Uh-oh.
He would use Okay, this one is going to kill you. He would beat himself. You know, he had like the cat and nine tails he made, and he had the paddle with the needles. But here's my personal favorite. He would take wool doused with lighter fluid, stick it up his butt, and light it on fire.
That's your favorite?
I'm being, you know, I'm
It's like
joking.
boofing, but on fire.
Yeah, you know, I can honestly say I haven't had a client who's experienced that kind of a want or need.
He would also, there was also a report that he would put the rose stems and roses in his butt and then eat the roses.
That's so
This
wrong.
man is just all kinds of fucked up. What the heck?
I want to know where these. So this is what he said that he did.
Some of this is stuff he said. Others were report. This is most of these things came from things he said, reports he made to his psychiatrist, reports from other people, reports from his children. These are his things.
So going back to his psychiatrist, what was his? I mean, those are all, you know, paraphilias, or not all of them, but some of them are. What was his mental health diagnosis? What was up with his
Paranoid schizophrenia.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense because he has schizophrenic family members. So, yeah, okay.
All right. I'm going to tell you that if you, like I said before, there is so much documentation and study that's done on this case that we could turn this into hours long, but we're not going to. We're going to try to do this now.
But I want to talk about the ass roses.
Your dad called him. Your dad was listening to a documentary with me, and when this part came on the documentary, he looked over at me and he went, "Doo-doo roses? Really?"
All upset.
He was upset. He's like, "I'm not listening to none of this crap with you anymore."
Roses. The ass roses were the line.
Now, he never did. The children, all of his kids said he was never abusive or physically attacked his own children, but he did encourage them to hit him with his paddle as a game.
Yeah, so that's so weird for them, probably in hindsight.
Along with these behaviors, Albert also took great pleasure in writing these obscene and vile letters to unsuspecting people. People call this epicaricacy. Gosh darn it.
Excuse-moi.
EPICARICACY writing. Basically what it means is you do something for you take joy from another person's pain or horror. Okay. So he would write these things, and he would put ads in papers, or he would answer ads, like a woman looking I'm a maid, I would be willing, and she'd get her address, and he'd write her these filthy letters. He went to jail for it several times, like horrific letters, which I won't be reading here.
You can't send it without a stamp and a return address. He's like, dang it, I'm gonna get busted. But
Setting your own butthole on fire is as far as I'm going with this, okay? And a conversation. That's it. That's all you're getting.
Yeah, his prereqs for being a creep are pretty up there.
Okay, now we're going to talk about his crimes. We're that far. He is known to have kidnapped and tortured young men for long periods of time. I told you earlier he worked as a painter and would spend lots of time in basements, which is where he would molest these boys.
Where is he meeting them?
All over the streets. We're talking about 1930, 2930. People ran amok. They were just,
Yeah.
kids would play because nobody thought this guy existed. This is the boogeyman right here.
Well, yeah, and then there's not even there's not a 10 o'clock thing like there was in the 90s. Do you know where your children are?
He would lure them, and these, kids are out on the street. He'd lure them with things like raisins.
Yeah, Depression time. It was the time of the Depression, not that
It was. The Depression started in 1929, so it was during this time that it was a hard time for everybody.
Yeah, harder for some than others, apparently. Poor kids.
Now, and he practiced self-mutilation. We talked about that.
Yeah.
He had many aliases such as Frank Howard, Thomas A. Spragg, Robert Hayden, and John W. Pell. He was called the Gray Man. They called him the Gray Man because he looked like he was about 5'6". He was this tiny little skeletal framed looking man with gray hair and this giant gray mustache. When he was younger, he was very dapper. He dressed nicely, hat, the whole bit. He didn't seem, and he was very soft spoken. He didn't seem anything like the man that would do this kind of thing. But they called him the Gray Man because he was seen in the areas where these things would happen, where the children were disappearing, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Okay.
He was called the Werewolf of Wisteria because he had a house, a cottage called Wisteria, where it was abandoned, and that's where he would commit some of his crimes. The Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman.
I feel like, those are pretty telling nicknames.
They are. It's terrifying. And most of these names were given to him by children. So, that's scary.
That's the thing. If I heard my kid come home and be like, the boogeyman's out there, I'd be like, what did he do? What's wrong?
Yep.
The parents are like, oh, these kids.
Yep.
Oh, sure.
They're horror stories.
Now, he was suspected of 10 murders, but he only confessed to 3 at the time of his trial. And over 400 molestations of children, mainly small boys, in over 27 states, usually black, usually disabled. The span of his crimes was, and this is inaccurate because it's 1924 to 1932. They're just talking about these particular murders.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been doing this since he was a kid.
Yeah, and it's like with the self-harm, we know that he was into the peakerism, but he was self-harming probably from the time he was a little kid, just like with the way that stuff usually plays out. And so the same with that, he was doing other things before things got so twisty.
All right. So now I'm going to give you, instead of going through, all the things he's into, what people said about him, he was, how weird he was, and all the things that were going on with him. So now I'm going to give you the timeline of his crimes. And I'm probably not going to give you every detail because some of it is so horrific I cannot make it come out of my mouth. I can't do that.
Yeah.
But you can, there's a really good documentary on Netflix right now, I believe, and it's called it's Salvation in His Sin. It's about Albert Fish. It's about an hour and a half long. It's a pretty good watch. Don't let your kids watch it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any salvation to be had, though. Just throw that out there.
That's the first episode.
In 1910, Thomas Bedden was the 19-year-old mentally handicapped, impaired man that he had the sadomasochistic relationship with. This is the one where he cut off, where he tried to castrate him, okay? He held and tortured him for about 2 weeks, and he had planned to kill him. This is what the stories he's telling now. He had planned to kill him and cut up his body and take it home. But instead, he tied him up and tried to castrate him. He said he would never forget the scream or the look that this boy gave him, so he doused the wound with peroxide and wrapped it in Vaseline-covered handkerchief, left him $10 and a goodbye kiss. Never saw him again.
God.
1919, Fish stabbed an intellectually disabled boy in Georgetown. That's the only information on that. He
That
developed...
makes me so mad that he's just messing with vulnerable populations in that way.
Well, he's a little guy. Who was he really going to... it was going to have to be vulnerable populations, or he could never have fulfilled some of his horrific fantasies.
No, and it's so typical.
And the power, he's got to have control.
Yeah, you're so right. That power dynamic that he's so in charge.
Now, he developed weapons that he called his implements of hell. It was a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a small handsaw. And he claimed to have paid other children to bring him children. He would get the older kids to bring him little kids. And he would leave his implements of hell wrapped in a package, and he would hand it to a store clerk, and he would say, "Could you hang on to this for me while I run this kid over to his parents?" And so he took a lot of delight in having these people holding on to these murdering pieces of stuff for him while he was walking around.
Yeah.
Jesus.
In 1924, July 11th, 8-year-old Beatrice Keel is playing alone at her parents' Staten Island farm, and down the road comes walking Albert Fish, and he offers her money to come help him find rhubarb in the field. She was about to go with him when her mother comes out with a broom and chases his ass down the road.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Now, he was later found by Beatrice's father while he was asleep. He was sleeping in their barn.
He didn't go far.
No, her dad beat the crap out of him.
Sweet.
And later, Mr. Keel would identify him as the man on the farm, okay? Now, the ones that I'm telling you about, like the boy, Thomas Bedden, Thomas Bedden came forward and identified Albert Fish. The Keels came forward and identified Albert Fish. So all these people are gonna come forward after he's caught and say, "Yep, that's the guy."
Yeah.
1924. Fish was 54 years old, suffering from some sort of psychosis, and he believed that God had commanded him to torture and sexually mutilate children.
Yeah, that was my question. Is like, how do we know if he really thought that? Also, at the same time, though, if he was schizophrenic or schizoaffective.
That's why you can't tell from any of his stories. He's so frustrating. You can't tell how much of it was real and how much of it was his delusions.
Yeah.
He tried to test his implements of hell on a 10-year-old child he'd been molesting named Cyril Quinn. Now, Quinn and his friend were playing catch when Fish said, "Hey, you guys want to come up to my apartment for lunch?" So they go up to this one, he's cooking, and the boys are wrestling. You know how boys wrestle.
Yeah.
And they were wrestling on Fish's bed when the mattress came away from the frame, and underneath the bed, all laid out, were his implements of hell. Both of the boys freaked out, and they yeeted on out.
Did you say yeeted?
I said yeeted.
Oh, that's good. That's good shit.
They left.
Yeet. Skirt.
They skedaddled. Does that make you happier? Is that more my age?
No, I liked yeeted. I was with
Look,
it.
I learned so much from my granddaughter that I can talk the talk now. I am cool as hell. Okay?
Yeah, my younger clients, my like teens and stuff like that, they'll tell me stuff like that. They're like, "Man, it was so mid," and like, he's got the riz, and I'm like, "Yeah, baby."
Yes, I recently found out I had riz. I did.
You got mad riz.
That's what.
All there is.
That's the funny sound.
July 14th, 1924, 9-year-old Francis McDonald was reported missing after he failed to return home after playing catch with his friends. His body was found hanging from a tree in a wooded area near his home. He'd been strangled with his own suspenders, sexually assaulted. He had suffered many internal and external injuries.
How old?
9.
Just fucking makes me mad.
February 11th, 1927, 4-year-old Billy Gaffney and his friend Billy Beaton, the two Billies, were playing on their bikes in the hallway of the apartment building. And both boys disappeared, but Billy Beaton was later found on the roof, and they asked him, "Where is Billy?" And he said the boogeyman took him.
Okay.
These kids were 3 and 4 years old. Why are they on the roof of the building?
Little bitty babies.
Little ones. Now remember Billy Gaffney's name, because his poor mama never believed that he was really dead. She just never could.
Oh.
But later a motorman named Joseph Meehan And remember this guy's name too, because he is another one who identified Fish. He identified him, the Fish, as the man who was on the Brooklyn trolley with an inconsolable toddler boy crying for his mother. He later wrote a letter to his attorney with the horrific details of that murder as well. And I'm just going to tell you, don't go looking for it. Don't look for it. Don't read it. Don't.
It'll hurt your soul.
It's so awful. He just basically wrote a letter and detailed what he did to this kid.
It's NSFE, not safe forever.
Yeah. Now, on May 28, 1928, under the alias Frank Howard, Albert Fish answered an ad for an offer for a boy who wanted to work on a farm. Edward Budd, age 18, at 406 West 15th Street in Manhattan. Fish visits the Budd family in Manhattan and makes arrangements to hire Edward and his friend. He brought them cheese and strawberries from his fake farm and had lunch with them. He said he would pick them up in a few days. So Fish calls on the Budds. He sends them a telegram, handwritten telegram, and says, I'm going to be a little later than I planned, but I'm still coming. And they get a Western Union thing, all right? So Fish calls on the Budds on the following Sunday with intention of picking up the boys. But the second he saw young Grace Budd dressed in her Sunday best, a white silk dress, white silk stockings, and little dress shoes, he knew that he wanted her instead of the boys.
Oh.
So he made, and you know why that is? He got there, and those boys were a hell of a lot bigger than he thought they were going to be.
Oh, they were grown?
They were grown. Well, they're 18. He could have read that, but I don't know what he thought,
Yeah, I'm like, what did you expect?
Those strapping boys coming to work on your farm.
But maybe a part of it is that he just enjoyed manipulating because, he wrote those letters and stuff.
Oh yeah, he was like, the more delight that he could get from other people's pain, the happier he was. I mean, he just loved that. Fish called on the Budds, and he gives Grace, he's having a little conversation with little Grace. She sits on his lap. She gives him a kiss on the cheek. He gives her some money so she can go buy some candy for her and her friends, and she runs off. And while she's gone, he's like, hey, I got this telegram from my niece last night, and my great niece is having a birthday party, and she is Grace's age. And I have to go do that, and then I thought I would come back and grab the boys and we'll head out to the farm, but would Grace like to go with me and go to this little girl's birthday party?
Oh, she would not.
They thought about it, and Mrs. Spud was like, I don't know, you're weird, you're a strange man, but he's this rich stranger who just came to call on the boys. He's a benevolent, sweet man. And Dad says, she never gets to have any fun, let her go.
Oh.
No.
So he told her parents, Albert Francis Budd and Delia Bridget Budd, that he would be back in just a little while, and Delia watched her walk away with Albert Fish holding his hand.
Oh, that's horrible.
Albert led Grace to the train, and they got on the train and they rode to where this cottage was in Irvington, New York. And he left his package on the train, his package of implements of hell. And Grace says, wait! And she runs back on the train and grabs his package for him. And she said, I wouldn't want you to forget your package.
Oh.
And this is according to him. Gives her back the thing. So he took her to the cottage called Wisteria at 359 Mountain Road in East Irving, New York, where he strangled her to death, decapitated and dismembered her body, and ate the remains over the next several days.
Oh my God.
Okay, then he disappeared, and everyone was looking for Frank Howard.
Yeah.
In May of 1930, Fish is arrested for writing obscene letters to a woman who answered an ad for a maid. Following that arrest and another in 1931, he was sent to Bellevue Hospital for observation. He was there for a couple of weeks. In May 1934, an anonymous letter was sent to Grace's mother that led the police to Fish. Now, this letter is so disturbing. I'm not going to read all of it to you. I'm going to read a little bit, and then we're just going to move on. If you want to read it, you can do that on your own terrible time, but I'm telling you, it's not great. He starts off by he calls her my dear Mrs. Budd. And he tells the story of Captain John Davis, who sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong and whatever, and how there was a famine in China, and every child under 12 years old was picked up and sold for meat so people could eat. This is the story he told. He said that he had acquired a taste for human flesh.
Okay.
All right. He goes on and he says, on Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street. I brought you pot cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat up on my lap and kissed me, and I made up my mind to eat her.
Oh. Your mom read this?
Huh?
Your mom's reading this?
Yeah, no, well, I'll tell you how that worked out. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped off all my clothes because I didn't want to get blood on them.
Oh, wow.
When all was ready, I went to the window and called her, and then I hid in the closet until she came into the room. When she saw me, she began to cry, and she started screaming she would tell her mama. It goes on to talk about the things that he did to her, and that he did let her know he didn't have any relations with her, that she died a virgin. But the entirety of that letter is awful. Now, his mother, Mrs. Budd, was illiterate, so the son picks up the letter and he starts reading it to her, and he doesn't get very far before he freaks out, runs out the door, and takes it to the police. He did not read this whole thing to her mother.
Okay, good.
He was suspected of 12 other murders as well, but not convicted. All right? Yetta Abramowitz, 12 years old, beaten and strangled. Mary Ellen O'Connor was found in the woods close to the house he had been painting. She was 16. Thomas Bedden, age 19, 1910. Emma Richardson, age 5, October 3rd, 1926. Emil Ailing, age 4, July 13th, 1930. Robin Jane Louet, age 6, May 2nd, 1931. Benjamin Collins, age 17, December 15th, 1932. These are murders that they suspected him of as well. Okay. Now, the police acquire a copy of the Western Union message that Fish had sent to the Budd family and compared it to the handwriting from the letter that Fish had sent to Delia Budd. It was a match, and at this time they still all believed this was Frank Howard. So almost immediately after receiving Albert Fish's letter, the Budds had turned it over to the police, and the investigators noted that the envelope was adorned with a small hexagonal emblem representing a local association for private chauffeurs. So they found the janitor at the company's headquarters who admitted to having taken some of the stationery home and leaving it in a rooming house on a shelf in room 7. So Detective William King goes to the room and asks to see the ledger for room 7 at the rooming house, and there it was signed Albert Fish. It was a match to the previous handwriting, so he was like, this is my guy.
Yeah.
He was said to receive a check there from his son every month, so the police made arrangements with the matron there to watch the house and contact the police if he showed up. So when Fish finally does show up to get the check, they called the detective and he comes. So he walks in, he says, Albert Fish. The guy says, yes. He says,
"You're under arrest, motherfucker."
Albert pulls a blade out of his pocket. A knife. Now remember, he is this old dude. And he's real frail, and he's like 100, I think when they arrested him, they said he was 118 pounds. So this
Really was a gray man.
this scary, awful man, this cop just flicks the knife out of his hand, puts him in handcuffs, and takes him in. There was no show. That was the end of it.
That's good.
Now, he was identified by a bunch of people, but the most striking ID was done by Grace's brother and his father. He was identified by all those people that we talked about before.
Yeah.
When Edward Budd, that's her brother, saw Fish sitting in a chair in the police station, he leapt over desks and through the whole police station aggressively. He was going to kill him right there.
Yeah.
He's screaming, "You're the guy. You're the one." And the cop stopped him. Mr. Albert Budd walked right up to him and looked him in the face. I mean, they were inches away from each other, and he said, "You're the man who took my little girl away." And then he just covered his face and started to weep.
Aww. I hate that. I hate that so much.
Now, Fish undergoes a barrage of psychological tests and visits with psychiatrists and a physical exam, and this is when they did the x-ray of all his pins and needles inside of him.
Yeah, and you should... it's just an x-ray, so it's not like you see, like, any gore, but it's just the wildest thing. It's so disgusting, and I don't know how he moved.
I don't either. And some of those, some of those pins and needles have been in there for years.
Just saving them for later.
Now, during the trial, Frederick Wortham, who was the defense's chief expert witness who conducted the psychiatric examinations for the court, explained that Fish's obsession with the story of Abraham and Isaac was his reason, and that's why he believed sacrificing a boy would be penance for his own sins, and that if God didn't want him to do it, he would have sent an angel to stop him.
Well, that makes sense. That makes
perfect sense. He also believed that Fish's cannibalism was associated with Holy Communion. Wortham declared Fish insane. In all, the defense called 2 more mental health professionals that agreed Fish was insane. The prosecution had just as many witnesses who said he wasn't.
Fishes be crazy.
Because they did talk about, I mean, that was his defense, is that he was insane. And this is where you come up with criminally insane. Is he criminally insane, or is he just
Certifiably insane.
certifiable? Yeah. That's one of the interesting questions, because certainly things were not right in his world. Certainly he didn't see things like a normal functioning human being would. But he obviously knew that what he was doing was wrong because he tried to hide it.
Well, and it's aliases. Yeah, the aliases, and he was methodical about some things. Like
moving around and everything.
Yeah, moving around. The fact that he wrote letters and searched up people, that he did things to freak people out, that he watched other people, those are not normal behaviors. That, in insanity, you're going to be mixed up. You're not going to be able to come up with all of these methodical ideas on how to cover your own ass.
Yeah. It's true.
The only real difference there, criminally insane, is a person who's been judged by a court or state officials to not be guilty of a crime because they don't have understanding that their actions were wrong. He did have understanding.
Yes, he did. Well, Fish's children testified about what a great father he was and how well he treated them after their mother had left. I mean, how he was a mother and father both to them. He did all the things he needed to do. They said they knew he was eccentric and weird, but it was really hard for them to reconcile the father that they knew to the monster that he was.
I wouldn't want to.
They just couldn't imagine how someone that had loved them so well could be such a monster. It was hard for them.
Well, yeah, and that's anybody. Like, that when you find out that there's been sexual abuse from somebody and everyone's shocked because it's usually someone close to you. It's not the kind of thing you can pick out.
Yeah. Now, the whole jury was convinced that he was insane, but they convicted him anyway. Because one jury member stated that although they knew he was crazy, they all thought he should be executed. They didn't want him to ever have a chance to hurt another human being like that.
Yeah.
And this
I
was
don't think he was crazy.
this was in the 30s.
I think that he was probably schizophrenic, and I think that he probably dealt with delusions and hallucinations, but, you know, that's not... It waxes and wanes. And he was methodical.
Well, Fish stated that he felt like he would do more good being studied than killed, and his children had requested that he spend his life in a mental hospital. And it's probably true. If they had had more time to have more conversations with Fish, I think they would have learned a lot from this guy. But he arrived at prison in March of 1935, and he was executed January 16th of 1936 by electrocution. They didn't mess around in the old days.
Well, and what he did to children, you know, like, there is so much to learn from people like that in a scientific sense, but I'm not surprised that they wiped him off the face of the planet, because they were just such vulnerable people that he went after.
And the gruesomeness of it all.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Totes.
Okay, so they said there's this big rumor that because of all the pins and needles that were in his body, that this electrocution was going to be a problem. So it took 2 jolts to kill him, according to one witness, which started the rumor that the pins in his body caused a short circuit. This is false. So if anybody wants to, you know, that didn't happen. It was just, they said it was as normal an execution as any they had done.
Yeah. People always want to think it's something more, you know, sensationalized.
When reporters asked his lawyer for his last statements, James Dempsey revealed that he would never show it to anyone. He said it was the most filthy string of obscenities he had ever read.
Wow. That his last words were despicable.
They were so bad he would never show them to anyone.
Good on him.
I'm intrigued though. I want to know.
Right? Like, part of me does too.
I read the other letters that he wrote, and I don't want to read that. It can't be any better than it can't be any worse than what he's already written.
Yeah, and it's his last chance to be despicable.
Yeah, and he took it. Not, I'm sorry for what I've done, none of that, just...
Well, see, and that's the other thing. No empathy, no guilt. If you're psychosis, you know, people do a lot of crazy, wild things when they're dealing with that, but a normal human who does those things is going to feel guilt and, you know, remorse.
I'll tell you, I have 10 kids of my own. I have 5 stepkids, and they have spouses, and they have children, all of them. And I have grandkids, and I'm going to tell you something. The thought of any of them having to endure this person, I think that he should be he should be covered in blood and torn apart by dogs. That's how I feel about this guy. I'm just, nope. And that's why you don't let your children out.
Well, you do. You just go with them. Never let your children in the sun, ever. But no, it's...
Okay, so was he insane or wasn't he?
Yes.
I think he went through... It sounds like he had psychotic episodes and, you know, schizophrenic... or schizotypal, you know, symptomology. but maybe like a psychopath or a sociopath rather than crazy, because again, he didn't have remorse. He was methodical. He had a type of victim. You know, he wasn't just like running around psychotically doing things. He was doing things on purpose, and then he was terrorizing people with the letters, and he was an emotional terrorist. I don't think that he was insane. I think that he was sick and a psychopath. But there's a difference there. You know, like, people commit wild crimes sometimes when they're psychotic, like murders too. But it would be a freaking mess. It wouldn't be so like, oh, I did it this way, and like people call me the gray man and the boogeyman because I hide in dark places and do terrible things to children.
He was 65 years old when he died. Okay. 5 of those years he spent with his family. 5 of those years he spent in an orphanage. And the rest of that time he spent terrorizing the entire.
Yeah, so he was, and not, you know, not excuses, but explanations. You know, he lost all of the close attachments he had in childhood. He was abused in many, many ways, and so that whole nature part is definitely there. And it probably had a big effect on him, but a lot of people lose their parents and, you know, go through some horrible stuff and go through abuse, and they don't behave like that.
It's true. All right. Was he telling the truth about his crimes?
I think for the most part, I feel like he was.
I think probably some of the details that were in there were probably like to freak people out more. But I think he hurt as many people as he said he did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he was crazed. He couldn't stop. It's hard to tell though, because, you know, the way that like I said, I didn't read all of it, but I mean, he told this mom how he had cooked her child and with what vegetables and stuff. I mean, such detail in horror that I don't know if it's all fantasy or if some of it's not fantasy.
Yeah, and you never will know because of when this happened. You know, there's no interviewing but honestly, you know, this sometimes it's just not worth it, because some people like that won't tell you the truth ever. So if you interview them, it's like it's a joy for them to get to freak you the hell out.
Yeah, that's what I think he was all about.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Should he have been executed, or should he have been studied? What do you think?
Executed for me.
Yeah, like, as a mental health professional, of course I'm curious about that. I tend to just go with, like, what it seems like families want whenever I hear things like this. Like, I'm not the one who got hurt, but I am interested in the science part. So I'm like, yeah, we totally should have studied him. But how could you live in a world and know that he's walking around after what he did to your baby?
Yeah.
I say, let the motherfucker burn.
Yep. Y'all hear the thunder?
Yeah, it's all cloudy here now, too. It was like 107, and now it's...
Well, it has just stopped raining here, so I think it's heading y'all's way, so I'm going to go.
Oh, yeah. We got hit. It's all flooded out here now.
We're dispersed through New Mexico.
Well, I guess we came.
We saw.
We heard some weird shit.
It's so weird. Like, definitely just Google the Albert Fish X-ray. It's not like gory, disgusting. It's just the weirdest X-ray you've ever seen.
Oh, in the picture of him that I saw, he looks like a delicate, like, he's not.
He looks
doesn't
like
look crazy. Like,
no, he looks like a gray man, huh?
yeah, like he's just chilling. Like,
Yeah, that's why he was able to get out of so much stuff, because no one could believe that such a little old frail man could be anything that they thought he was. All right, you guys.
Alrighty.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
see you next time.
Make it rain.
Bye.
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 That's the funny sound.
I'm Lisa.
I'm Faith.
And I'm Sharon.
Join us next time on She Sees Weird People. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a weird story to tell or case idea, contact us at weirdpeople@sheseesweirdpeople.com. Be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at She Sees Weird People Podcast. This podcast was written, hosted, and produced by Sharon Metcalf, Faith Dunovit, and Lisa Metcalf. Produced by Sedona Brave Studios. Music by Purple Planet Music, sound effects by Pond 5.